Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing? Eve,
Good,
how are
how are you?
you?
I'm
Eve?
good. Hi.
Hi. How's it going?
For a minute there, I was like, huh, what's
Oh,
going
I
on?
know. And it's between muting and unmuting of the digital platforms. How was the read, the intro? Any
It was
questions, any
good.
thoughts?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm still gonna go over it again, but
Oh, yeah,
as of now, yeah.
yeah, we're gonna
Okay.
go through it together.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, and then we have a few more chapters today and Thursday,
Okay.
and then we'll keep going. How's
All
everybody's
right.
weekend going?
Mine was great. Yeah.
Did you relax?
Good Labor Day. Yeah.
Good.
For what you can. Yeah.
I think we need to make time in the schedules for relaxation at this
Absolutely.
point. Wendy, how are you doing? And Shannon, how are you?
Hi.
Happy you're in this class.
Hi, I'm good. How was your summer?
It was eventful. How about yours?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I kept going back and forth I moved to Dorchester with my mom this summer. So I was going back and forth from my grandmother in Northborough to my mom in Dorchester, and it was just crazy.
It's it's a really, really unusual time.
Yeah.
And super possibilities for change are sort of imminent. It's not a question of if, but it's sort of integrating what we are now going through into everyday life. But with a move, certainly. Did you get a chance to go through stuff and reconsider maybe what you need and what you don't need with a move?
Yeah, I definitely pared down a lot because when we came back last semester, I like kind of knew that we were moving, so I like pared down at that time. So like when the move finally came, like in like mid-July, I think, I totally was ready. Like stuff wise,
Yeah,
like I didn't have all that random clutter.
right.
Because I mean, there's nothing else to do except to like clean and like organize.
Clean and reconsider how we're
Yeah.
what we're doing. Have you had a chance to go outdoors? Do you have an outdoor space?
Right now,
Yeah,
or
or whenever.
yeah, I mean, there's like a little balcony. We live in like a little apartment complex, and
Yeah.
so I went and got her a bunch of plants as like a little housewarming gift. So I mean, it's nice. I think it's cute.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting to reconsider when you have to downsize or you're just moving in general, to
Yeah.
reconsider really what are the essentials, what is it that you need. Basically, if you have a little desk, and a space for yourself, then that might be just enough. Hey, everyone. All right, welcome, guys. Lucian, welcome. John, welcome. Carla, welcome. Oh, it's so good to see everybody. Virtually, of course. Uh, so we're going to discuss, first of all, the intro that you guys read. Today you are reading about the Paleolithic period. We're going to go through that. We're going to go through some slides. Um, I want you to really think about having, first of all, first of all, your attention, right? So when you're doing these courses, of course, being online, in theory, you could be watching a movie in the background and, it's totally possible. You're welcome to do that if you want to. The other part of it is, of course, that you're paying for this course, and hopefully it has something to communicate, right? So we were talking about last Tuesday about for what the sense of community was in the prehistoric time period, and what that meant, right? In the Cueva de las Manos, when you had multiple people's hands on the wall, and what being part of actually a tribe looked like, right? Obviously in Corona and in an individualized state of being that we have in the US, that sense of community and that sense of belonging to a tribe that you agree with is quite a challenge. Um, Part of this class, of course, is that all of your voices and all of what you're sitting with at the screen, right? All of your experience, all of your history, how you were raised from the time that from your mom's and dad's point of view, from your grandparents' point, all of that information and material is sitting here with you right now. It's not in some sort of weird history bank, right? History, or what we consider sort of back there, is not anywhere in a linear format somewhere in a back, right? If you're thinking about history and art history or history of images, they're all with you, right? We have in our DNA, in our genetic makeup, we have all of it from the beginning, from the time we were in the womb and we were fish swimming. Okay, so reconsider this idea that history is something that we have as human species sort of lived through in a linear fashion. It makes no sense. The linearity of it makes no sense. And it's certainly not one line. If you're thinking about it at all, it's these multiple perspectives that are kind of funneling and coming together. Okay? Are you with me? I know it's talking to myself. All right. I'm going to share screen and we're going to go through a little bit of the intro that we were talking, that you were reading with. So when you're sitting here and listening, of course, it's a very active participatory kind of listening. Understand that the sensibility that you sit here with, the way that you sit, the way that your body is, you can listen with multiple parts of your body. If you're fully engaged, tell me what you can't do.
Oh, me?
Yeah. No, I heard somebody. When you're fully engaged, when you're present with all your sensibilities, it means that we're going to be thinking and looking at these images all together. And when all of those brains are functioning from each of your points of views, it becomes an incredibly interesting discussion. Of course, you have to, in this platform, you have to think about how you engage, right? This is a very unusual platform. You can't see each other's faces. If you have something to say or add to the slides, if your brain suddenly makes a connection between the slide and something that you've experienced, please unmute yourself and so that you can participate in the discussion. Of course, you have to give each other, respect each other and make sure that you're not talking over one another. But that's how we're going to go. Okay, any questions before I share my screen? All right, here we go. All right, so we are going from the prehistory time, all right? And we start with this image, which was very interesting. So this is Egyptian from a tomb painting. Talk to me about what it said in the book about the visuals, all right? There was a comparison of space. There was a discussion between this not depicting spatial relationships in the text, all right? I want you to be incredibly critical of what you are reading and understand both that what you're reading is from one point of view, all right? And it is not necessarily the multiple points of view that we're looking at. So look at it again with me. Look at this image with me and tell me what it is that you see. What are we looking at? Anyone? So we have, it's a tomb. It's painted in it. It was painted in a tomb. Go for it. You have the Egyptian, the main character right here. The largest one is that's the owner of the tomb, right? What is he doing? And talk to me about what tombs mean. What the idea of an afterlife is in comparison to what our ideas of death are right now. Anyone have ideas? Throw them out there. Your brain is looking at an image. Why this? Yeah, Carla.
Some stuff that will help him get into the afterlife and to live in the next world.
Okay.
Might have some farm stuff or.
Right. So look at this. So there is a voyage, right? He's standing on top of a ship, right? He's going through a transition. It's a very different way of understanding death besides the way that we think about sort of a finite finish when our body is done, right? They continue the body, they continue the journey, and then you have all of this flora and fauna, right? You have the river, you have, if you look at the bottom very closely, there's actually a fish at the bottom of underneath the river, and you have all of these birds there. This is a hunting scene, and hunting was a pastime in Egypt. What's also very interesting about Egyptian art and tombs in general, and I'm going to go move because there's now landscaping that's being done in the neighbor's yard. You have this idea of a land that you are using, right? Like you are using, the animals that are in the ocean, the birds that are flying around, right? Your environment. And it continues in the afterlife. But what about the break? Talk to me about what this shard is. Why is it all broken up? What is that? Because something happens to this. This is in a tomb, in a painting, on the painting, so that it goes and transforms to the afterlife of the person who has died. However, now it's being taken out of context. So why is it being taken out of context, and what context are we looking at? Anyone? Give me an idea. Why is it a shard? Why is it broken? Where is it coming from? From
It
the
was
text. Yeah.
pillaged by people in Egypt, which they went the grave diggers, robbers.
Right. So this is Western colonization, right? Like this is someone taking a chunk from somebody's, it's like going to somebody's home really, and like digging out. This was torn out and chiseled out of the wall itself, right? And taken to a museum. This idea of kind of robbing the grave, which has, for the colonial point of view, this is a beautiful image, right? And it wants to belong in a museum for other people to see. However, it's also a moneymaker, right? They saw this beautiful painting on the wall in the grave, and they decided to pillage it, basically, right? And the shard that is left over is the terrible quality and the poor quality of that they did to not take any care, but basically they took it. They wanted to take the drawing, and therefore creating all these cracks in it, and really breaking it up. So the colonial point of view is that they grabbed what they wanted, right? Totally taking it out of the context of the tomb, and not understanding. I mean, we have no idea what happens after death, right? But the Egyptians certainly had a different point of view, that this was a painting that was meant to be at this particular site. There's a whole reevaluation right now with museums of looking at artwork, and reconsidering really how the artwork got there, right? And if it was through theft, what are the reparations? What are we going to do to fix it? Of course, we get this image and we get to know about it and read about it. But at the same time, this could have been a possibility of taking a photograph, or later on in history, obviously, and reconstructing this tomb, or see the actual tomb, right, in its context. Anyone have ideas about this kind of pillaging and taking artifacts and using it? It's the same kind of mentality that we have, right, in colonization, thinking that these things are here for our use, right? Where they absolutely were not. This was painted for a very different purpose. All right. So when you're looking at the textbook that you're reading, think about what perspective is the author of the book writing from, and see if you can dig a little bit deeper. They also compared this idea of having no space. Anyone talk to me about what they compared in the introduction, this image, to a sense of space? Is there space in this painting, and how can you tell?
They said it was very two-dimensional in the reading. And I mean, from my perspective, it's not particularly two-dimensional. You do see layering of the boat on top of the water, the boat on top of the grass. And there are aspects of like, yeah, it can be perceived as flat, but I don't perceive it as particularly two-dimensional.
Right. So there's stylized characterizations of Egyptian art in this image, obviously, with the profile and all that, with the body, the styling, right? That's all there. At the same time, this idea of space that they compared it to in the book was an architectural space. So they compared it to like the Renaissance painting, when architecture was the main source of a house or structure, right? Architecture and space, the way that we think about space, architectural space, is the only way that we draw perspective, right? Perspective is when there's architecture. Obviously, with Egyptian and other cultures, if there is not such a concentration on a structure or on a home, then you get a different kind of space, because you're talking about the landscape. You're talking about a very different idea of space, all right? I wanted to show you quickly a landscape that's painted by Da Vinci in the Annunciation. It's actually in the background, but have a look. This is the kind of space that you're talking about in terms of the tomb painting. It's not a realistic, obviously, representation of architecture. It is it's atmosphere. It's actually the land in the context of a landscape, right? Of distance. And the only thing that gives you distance in the tomb painting is that you have this kind of sizing, right? This figure seems to be central and large in scale, where this one is a little bit smaller, but she also seems to be a little bit in the background, as does the smallest, the daughter figure, and this maybe the wife figure. So we have to be very careful of how we read these things. We read these things from our own perspective, and it comes from our own judgments, right? As soon as we apply our own judgment to it, it's skewed. All right, so the other part of the intro that had a few other sort of dilemmas in it was there was a talk about representation and Rothko, right? Saying that because it didn't have a figure, it doesn't have a figurative element or representational aspect to it. Rothko very much had the intention of having a body in front of the painting. He wasn't thinking about projecting a body and having a painting of a figure on his canvas, but he was interested in how the body is in relation to color, right? And color has a physical effect. These are huge paintings. They're projected onto, they're actually very large scale canvases. So when you stand in front of them, the color hits you at certain parts of your body, all right? So if you were thinking about this, actually standing in front of this painting, he didn't think about representation in terms of, again, a story or a figure on top of the canvas. However, he was very much interested in how he was enveloped by the color that he painted all around. So he was painting it about 2 feet away from the canvas and surrounded his body with the color that he was painting, whether it be this dark black or this green at the bottom. And if you ever stand or lie down in a color, meaning if it was flowers or whatever, it has an effect. It has a physical vibration that comes from the color of the painting, which is very interesting. So that's another thing to reconsider when you're talking about non-representational artwork. It definitely has just because it doesn't have a figure doesn't mean that it's fully abstract, okay? So go through this on your own, and again, read it from a critical point of view. We're going to move into the slides now for the Paleolithic. Does anyone have any questions about the intro or comments on what you've read, or questions about what you've read? Otherwise, we will continue. And I know it's the morning, but if you want to engage, feel free to unmute and mute, and we'll keep conversations in there. All right, so we're moving to the Paleolithic period. And this is a concept where initially you project your own image into, for example, a cloud, right? You watch an abstract shape and you identify it, or you name it. You say, oh, I see a, whatever, I don't know if they mentioned a boat or a submarine in the cloud. This is a rock from 3 million before, right? So, and this is a projection, right? This is not actually carved by an early man or an ape-like humanoid. It was in fact just eroded by nature. However, of course, when archaeologists find these kinds of rocks, they question, oh, were they, was there? They project their own, saying, oh, I see a face, right? And we often do this. We see faces in rock or natural formations where it's our own projection that's looking at it. But what's really interesting is that our brain, in fact, does make an association with something as abstract as that, right? Looking at the eyes or looking at the mouth. So when we are talking about prehistoric art, for some reason from the book, it only looks at Near East, which means a European history. What's interesting about that is that, of course, humans have moved from Africa outwards, is what is the thought, the theory. So thinking about the prehistoric period only being in Europe doesn't make, for me, a lot of sense. I mean, we have been rock painting and carving certainly in other areas, but for now, the book focuses on prehistoric art from Europe. All right, so we're looking at, and you're going to be reading about this tonight, the woman of Willendorf from about 30,000 years BCE. So that's about 10,000 years after the rock paintings that we were looking at in the first class. So think about that, okay? So 10,000 years later, this little carving comes into being. Talk to me about how she is made, what symbols you project onto her, maybe your relationship. Understand that it's not a sculpture figure as a sculpture, meaning that it was meant to stand in somebody's office. Obviously, it's not that kind, right? What purpose do you think she might have served? She doesn't have legs to stand on. However, it fits very nicely, the sculpture, into somebody's hand. So think about what was she for? What are we looking at, and why? Besides
I've
the plump,
seen
lovely little lady. Yeah, go ahead.
I've seen this image before in one of my past classes. We didn't really talk about it, but I do know it has to do with fertility. And I didn't realize that the size of it was so small that you could hold it in your hand.
Right.
So I'm imagining maybe if there was a woman who wanted to, have a baby and wasn't having the easiest time, or just wanted to make sure that that was really integrating into the energy that she was putting out there. Like, this is what I would imagine, like, you would hold on to when you were trying to conceive.
Yes,
Or
I mean, right, or
in the moment, but like, you know what I
right.
mean.
Yeah. No, I totally I thought about this little figure, and it fitting, the fact that it fits into your hand, right? The fact that you are holding this figure. First of all, the robust quality of her. The more fat you had in prehistory, the more likely you were to stay alive. Understand that heat or the round voluptuousness of her makes her be ideal for fertile ground, right? It keeps you warm. It's extra heat that you have, right, on your body. And oil was very, very important to the ancient people, because fat was an ideal way to preserve, to keep going, and it was a vital life force. It was food, right, and nutrition. It was rich in nutrition. So the bigger the better, because you were insulated in some ways. And then of course, as you're talking about the fertile ground, I also thought that when folks were perhaps giving birth, right, in that process, something to hold as like a stone or something is really vital, because you're gripping. Think about at other points of the time where you would want to grip something like this. And it doesn't matter, her head is this kind of pattern, right? It doesn't have a realistic face. So it's kind of a representation for all mother figures. There's many of these little women that have been found, and they must have been, by the way, carved. Obviously, Paleolithic means that they had stone tools. So this beautiful little rock was actually carved out using another rock. That's important to remember, right? So they didn't have chisels or like fine, but they had rock to carve this particular thing. So think about, if you were to have a stone, what would you possibly use to carve it, right? And if just slamming another rock into it would chip away at it at this precise kind of angles. She has little hands that are resting on her breast, right? Just these little details. It's really kind of fascinating. Anyone else want to chime in to looking at the woman of Willen? And by the way, there haven't been any male figures that have been found yet.
It's not super constructive, but I love her. I just love her so much. That's all.
There's some sort of, there is comfort, and imagine holding her, right? Imagine what that feeling would be like. And that she was meant to fit into the palm of your hand, I think, is also. Well, another thing was that she was painted in red ochre. So that might also have to do with women's fertility, obviously. Maybe it's like a doll that you pass on to the next generation of females. Who knows, right? We don't know those details. But it's amazing to get an object that has the touch of somebody from 30,000 years ago that you can hold today. So again, those of you who are thinking about messages into the future, I want you to think on this scale. What would you project 40,000 years into the future, or 30,000 years? And what would the message say? This obviously meant, we needed to populate the planet, at least in this. I think what the difference is that you need to start thinking about objects not as objects in their own, but objects of what they perhaps, the power that they might hold. Okay, so I want you to think of the Anchizi figure when you look at the woman of Willendorf, because people have had different interpretations of objects, right? Objects are super rare. They're not plentiful. You don't go to the grocery, whatever stores and have mass produced items. Anything from nature can be used and repurposed. And in fact, these objects were thought to have power. They were thought to have a soul of their own, right? This is the Anchizi figure, which is a power figure, which when ministers came to change the indigenous tribes, the indigenous tribes had this relationships between the sculptor and the shaman, and they would carve these figures specifically for the shaman. And what the purpose of the shaman would be almost like a doctor. You would go there, tell him your ailments, and the shaman would activate the Anchizi figure in order to make the ailments either go away. It could be a feud that you had with a neighbor, and they would put something in their stomach. There was a hole that was left inside the Anchizi figure in the center. They would rub oils or whatever inside of it, and to activate it, they would stamp a nail through the Anchizi figure, and that would ignite it into action. All right. Of course, when ministers or the folks that were the colonists that came over and saw these figures, they were terrified because they, in fact, could see how these sculptures acted. They weren't passive, right? And to start thinking about that, the environment that we use around us is not passive. Just because a tree of wood is no longer part of the tree, the other half of the life that comes from the tree is from its death, right? So rethinking objects and rethinking also this idea of death, right? That the ancients knew something about, where we may be lacking, right? With our mind is focused on consumption. That's what it has. That's the goal of advertisement for the last 200 years, and it has perpetuated what we have going on right now, and we need to reconsider that. All right, we're moving on in prehistory to the halls of bulls. Now we're in France. This is from 16 to 14,000 BCE, and again you have the relationship of the animal and fat, by the way, because the pigment now is mixed with fat. So talk to me about what you see in the halls of bulls right here. Guys, anyway, all of you have brains to see that signal what you're seeing. So give me anything that you see. Give me colors, give me shades, give me, how do you think it was done? Anything.
Well, it looks like there's one bull going toward it, like they're coming together or something.
Yeah, you have two bulls that are kind of charging at each other, but you have multiple other animal, like look carefully, because there's multiple other species that are kind of living, coexisting, or charging at one another. This is definitely an action painting. This is not, yeah, and you see the action. It's not only the representation of the animals right here, but with the people that are drawing these animals, you see the action of their hand, okay? It's not only about the representation, it's also how do you think the artists were feeling as they are painting this charge scene? You have one bull here, you have one bull here, then you have another couple of horse-like shapes over here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So it's layered. It's not just one kind of shot go. Some of them are carved, some of them are painted, some of them are just outlined, some of them are painted in, right? All right, and it's also in the Hall of Bulls, which is a cave that you go into the cave and you, so again, you don't have the animals in front of you. So how do you know this animal, right? This is still, the animal is so critical to the human survival, as it is critical right still, but we just forget. So this seems to be some sort of a ritualistic practice. It seems to be that maybe it's a ceremony that of age, of hunting, perhaps. Any other thoughts? Maybe the differences between what we saw in last week's rock painting to this one, to these ones. So what's the differences? Remember the ones that we saw of the eland last week?
Especially with the painting that you just had before this one, you can kind of see that, I don't know, because there's a lot of idolizing, and with that, in a more of a 2D form, you know, you make certain objects bigger, right? And so I'm wondering if they're painting all the different animals that are very useful to them in this time. Like perhaps because you can see there are horse figures and bull figures, and I'm wondering if the bull figures are larger, not only because, you know, they're large animals, but they also have a lot of like sustenance and food to them, when horses were probably used more for, you know, travel. And
Right.
I'm just wondering if they put them in sizes based off of how important they were in the life of, you know, the Egyptians, and what they were doing with them.
Well, certainly, yes, and certainly the way that this is, we're by the way out of the Egyptian period. We're into,
Oh,
yeah, but that's fine. You have the way that this dark line and this bull is outlined, and the sheer size of them talks about the strength of the animal, right?
Yeah.
And so talks about them knowing that strength, right? They somehow embody this force, right? It's very clear. I mean, the darkness of the outline, they're super precise at how this line is around the contour, how the legs are. This is a bull that's charging, right?
Yeah.
And you have the other smaller animals that are kind of going against it. You have one bull. Who knows what kind of these, they must have witnessed these kind of charges on each other, and the strength of that and the power of that. And imagine how humbling it would be to witness a charging bull in front of you. Understanding the power, understanding how sharp and how near death you are if these things stab you, right?
Right.
There's a knowing in this that obviously in common, in modern times, we don't understand the power of the animals that surround us, and the possibility of the force that they can unleash, right? So there, and perhaps it was a shamanistic kind of ritual to embody these animals at the same time, to figure out how to paint them in a closed off space away from everything, but still be so precise to understand that that line would have to go dip. This is a line that needs to be pointy at one end. So from one end of the stick, it's a tiny point, and but then he needs to twist that brush around, or that stick around, to make it thicker where it needs to be, that kind of belly of the beast right here, of the right before he goes to the feet. Anyway, so the precision again is extraordinary. This tells us a little bit that perhaps it was a shamanistic kind of ritual. This looks, have a look. What do you see in this image? I'm sorry about the overlay of this, but there's nothing. Go for it. Talk
It
to me.
looks like a man. It looks like a man who is, you know, literally up against the bull and its strength.
And I'm sorry about this taking a little bit of the space. Sorry, let's go back. What you don't see over here is that this is an arrow that's piercing through the bull. And what seems to be is guts over here, kind of getting splayed over here. So this is some sort of interaction hunt, perhaps. And the man is not just a man, but he has a bird head, okay? And that's accentuated by this. There's a bird on a stick on the bottom left-hand side. The man seems to have an erection or something. But there is perhaps a shamanistic kind of ritual with the bull during the hunt, right? You also have these. It's so interesting that what your mind can pick up. These lines that go at the top of the bull is when, you know, when a bull is charging or when it's really angry, right? You have the hair standing at the back of his neck. I mean, it's just like humans, right? The hair stands up at the back of our necks because when we're terrified or whatever, right? So these lines are to accentuate what the bull is experiencing, which is amazing that we can read from few simple lines, right? You can see so much. You can see the charging of the animal into the man, but then again, it's a hunt where it has already been slain and cut open. And then whatever the shaman is doing underneath, we won't guess, but we can whatever it is, you know, that's part of the shamanistic ritual. All right, we are going to the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, in the Fertile Crescent, which was in modern day Turkey. And something happens in modern day Turkey in this period where it becomes very different from how most people are living on the planet, which is in a nomadic lifestyle. But because it's a fertile crescent, there was enough vegetation to sustain folks to not have to migrate and go hunting for food and gathering for their fruits, right? So in the Neolithic period, in that fertile crescent, you have people that are starting to grow their own barley and wheat. They tend to goats and sheep and cattle and pigs. So they have found a way to keep the animals and domesticate some of them, domesticate the dog in this period of Fertile Crescent, which later gets stretched out to in the 6000 BC, it goes all the way to the British Isles. Okay, so you have this kind of first sort of human community that forms that stays now in sort of these houses, these townships. And the houses are made out of clay, very much like some of you guys did in sculpture and form design. These are made from the soil underneath. If you take clay, sand, and straw, you will get cob, and you get this kind of mixture that can make bricks, as well as lay out the. So it's all sculpted. It's all sculpted material. Okay, so you create your own home. You create your own structure. In modern day in New Mexico, you can see some Native American tribes still teaching their 16-year-olds how to build their own room, which all of you should know how to do. So when you look at the town, I had it last night, Catalhoyuk from Turkey, from 6000 to 59 BCE. You are looking at houses that were actually underground. There's ladders that go into these structures, and you would walk on top of the home. So you go down into the structure, and then you would have these fire pits for maybe common or gatherings for food, for making fires together. You also have, for the first time, outside of the caves, you have homes that are decorated now with pattern. All right. So think about that. So think about the settling of this idea of making a home and this decor that people wanted to, with patterns, decorate their walls with. I mean, it's very much the same like maybe you would want to do for yourself. If you want to claim your house, right? The walls are malleable. You can paint on them. So what would you paint? You know, would it be pattern? Would it be, and actually for most of you, some of you might want to start doing this. If you have a home or space of your own, claim it. It's yours. You know, with the landlord, you can always repaint the walls. So part of this class is paint your own wall, not really for an assignment. All right. And here we have from inside of the city, this particular in the Fertile Crescent, you also have these little sculptures. Similar to the woman of Gryffindor, you have this voluptuous woman, but now she's flanked with lions. I mean, this becomes a very powerhouse, right? This is a symbol of sitting in between these animals. Perhaps it's the dogs that are domesticated, but there's some sort of, talk to me about the head, by the way, is not the head that was on, that's redone. But outside of that, the body is what it was before. So talk to me about what you see in this little lady. She's also not big, by the way. If she's maybe, I don't know the size of her. I'll look that up. Talk to me about anything that you see.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I see, well, she's seated between two dogs or animals, I'm not sure which one, but probably symbolize some sort of protection. And she seems to have her hands on them, which probably is a symbol of domestication, or at least comfortableness with them. That's what I see right now.
It's lovely. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, there's this goddess figure sitting in this kind of seat, right, flanked by animals. I mean, this you could possibly, if you are thinking perhaps of different structures of matriarchy, perhaps. This is it. This is like the queen on a various throne, if you want to look at it that way. I believe this, not only her face, but this one looks like a restoration too, because this is very different. If you look at these two, the animals that are flanked, you have this one that's chiseled out quite differently. This one looks like a ceramic restoration.
Yeah.
Inside the home, these seats would also, there was a lot of finding with taking pieces of hunted animals. So this tribe has already stopped really, they didn't have to hunt and gather. However, there is a reminiscence of hunting having prestige. And oftentimes inside the architecture, again, you don't have a store to go run to maybe decorate or whatever, right? You don't have materials, but what you have, if you possibly continue hunting maybe for pleasure, is that now you have parts of the animals that are all throughout, like you see here decorating the bulls, decorating this kind of seat. which is very reminiscent. If you look at this kind of power figure, if you want to, this is, if this is your modern day couch, and you can be flanked by bull's horns, the person that's going to come to your house, will respect you in a different way, maybe. But certainly these horns were included throughout the towns, which means that they either used all the materials from the animals that they possibly did hunt, or perhaps that they valued the hunt in a way that that they could now, put and decorate their buildings with, which makes sense. Any other thought about this interconnectedness between architecture and art is what it is, right? Now you're connecting how you're living with the aesthetics of the place and really integrating the two. I mean, those horns are cemented into that seat. Any thoughts on this?
Sorry.
No.
Are those horns, are they carved out, or are those actual horns from the animals that they would hunt?
It's a good question. They are mostly found, they are from the hunt. They are from the actual, they're not cast. So they would be integrated. Now, I'm not sure how old these are and how long have they sustained, or if it's a replica cast. So that's something.
Right.
But in the original, in the archaeological dig, they found a lot of hunted skulls, a lot of teeth, a lot of stuff that they would take from the animal and then decorate the house with, to either establish a power to that house, or perhaps using the materials that they could find, the bones of the animals that they've hunted. Again, they didn't need to hunt for food anymore, right? So this is a different kind of purpose for the.
They really would utilize the whole animal. There was almost like an appreciation for the entire animal, even though they didn't use it for food at this point.
I think so, but I think that also might be our romanticization of the event. They didn't have anything else, so what they had were the tools that they could find. And if you are going to eat the animal, the bones are left over. You would probably go ahead and use them for various purposes. If you're painting your house, you might want to use one of the bones for a stick for painting with. You know what I mean? Like it's just practicality. Yeah. Like that's the stuff that you have around. This is a life cycle of the house at Çatalhöyük. They would demolish the top part of the house if they needed to or wanted to rebuild their house. They would take apart the current house, take the half off, and then use the materials, again, recycling the materials, not out of sort of idea of recycling, but because that's what they had. And they would reuse the materials to build a second story. By the way, underneath all the homes is where they would bury their dead, okay? So the bones over here that you see, they would, maybe more people have died, so they needed to expand the house upward, and that would be their life cycle. It's very much, if you look at cob, modern cob building, cob again is the clay material that has been banned in America because of the timber industry. That material is used, it goes right from the ground. You go put it into your walls, and the walls are incredibly insulated. They keep heat, and they keep cooling because the walls are so thick. So they're a very practical way of building, and still over 50% of the U.S. population, the world population uses mud huts is what they are, and they're incredibly efficient. Understand that, if there's a fire like we have going on in California, right? The materials of this house, when they burn, they're natural materials. When the California fires are going, all of the man-made stuff is obviously going into the air, and you'll have an impact because it's polluted. This is a very ecological way now of how to build a house. Let's keep track of the time. When are we going to? 12:15. We're okay. All right. From current slide. All right, we're moving on to something that I'm sure we've all thought about. Hopefully, we're going into the Neolithic, but the British Isles. Okay, so it's a younger. So you think about the town in Turkey being much older than the New England or England. I'm sorry, and Ireland Paleolithic. We want to talk about the post and lintel structure. Basically, when you're making architecture and you want a doorway, you need to put 2 posts and then a lintel on top, and then you have sort of a corridor to move through. This is how the Pantheon was constructed. You have those 2 large columns, and then the structure can rest on the top, right? And it's one way to think about having strong enough baseline to put a roof on, right? Because when you're thinking about how to create a house, unless you're in the first town that we looked at, where you have the roof as actually the floor, and then you're digging in, this is now you're erecting a building, okay? But we're going to look at the prehistoric version of that, which is Stonehenge, right? And I want you to bring everything that you possibly can when we're looking at this together. We're looking at post and lintel. You have posts that are holding up another structure on top, right? But for the perspective, when you look at the man in relation to the stone, right? Talk to me. First of all, of course, there's an idea that this is the sun cycle, that it's connected to the stars, but the mass is just so critical. This is from 3,000 years BCE, right? In our current modern technology, some of these things that the ancients have erected and have constructed have not been able to be matched. There was a wonderful project by Rick Brown through National Geographic. He was trying to erect try to make sense of how these things were constructed. So, for example, he raised an obelisk the size and using only the materials that were in Egypt, right? So manpower and sand. And he figured out that if you mounted, you made a hill, and then you drove the obelisk alongside of it, as you took the sand away from the hill, then the obelisk can slowly rise, and then by use of people, about 100 people, it could put the obelisk into place. But because there's such huge stones, how? And they were excavated in places that are, anyway, how do you think this is done? And what maybe for in our current understanding? Anyone want to take a guess at Stonehenge? Or I know we're not going to get into ancient aliens, but we could. So post lintel, huge stones. People can't move these things now. How the hell did they do it 4,000 years ago? Questions?
It's definitely interesting that they're rocks, so they're obviously extremely heavy, and just seeing how upright and how stacked they are.
And they're incredibly precise, right? The sun goes through them at solstice in precisely the right way and the right angle. What? With that current measuring tools, right? People go and engineers go and they stand with those poles because they want to align and make sure that the architecture that they place upon it is straight, and they still make mistakes. So again, with limited tools, with limited knowledge, people who are carving stone and chipping stone. First of all, how did they chip this stone off? Second of all, how did they move these tons and tons of, right? The guy is in the background, tons, right? This is man. This is one man. So imagine 1 man, 2 men, 3 men. Anyway, right, 50 men in one stone. What? Okay. We don't know, frankly. And all your guesses could feed into it. So we can talk about what perhaps it was for. They made various rings, right? There were various rings and various pits that are around Stonehenge that were cited to be much earlier than the immense rocks that we see and find as the post and lintel structures in the center. Okay, so there was a deep row that was a deep trench that was in the around the circumference of Stonehenge. That was built first, and then there was also a walkway that was built into walking up towards Stonehenge that was also predated that. Perhaps thinking about burial, again, thinking about the connection to the dead, especially when looking at the stars and the sun and the solstice, right? All right, so there's one altar stone, 6-ton monolith of a stone, 6 tons. There are 2, that was imported from Wales. 2 barrow without a burial, 3 barrows without burials. 4 fallen slaughter stones, okay, a heel stone, 2 originally 4 station stones, 7 and a ditch and a bark. Okay, so these, by the way, all these slides, you don't have to take notes. If you want to, you of course can, but all these slides and all these images are in Canvas, so you're always welcome to look at it on your own. Again, we don't know. We think that there was there would be processions that would go for the winter solstice, rituals that were done at Stonehenge, but truly how they were placed and what purpose and function they served is a mystery. And with the sheer size of them, it's really talking about the aptitude, actually, of the communities and the people of the ancient people that we think were so primitive, right? To look at the structure, to look at the architecture of these things, it's absolutely not the case. They were incredibly sophisticated. So we need to re-understand our thought about prehistoric people. There we go. Interior and the summer solstice that goes precisely through Stonehenge. All right, and the last conversation I would like you guys to have is between these two ladies, one from 30,000 years back and one from about 8 or 6,000 BC, so about 8,000 years back. All right. So tell me, obviously, similarities, and then let's talk about the differences and perhaps what these women, you know, what they stood, or what you think they might have, the importance of them, right? That we can still see them today.
I think the idea of like femininity and beauty has changed because they're both their forms are very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the forms are different. Again, there's a seated figure, and this is a different kind of figure. This is a standing figure. Although she was obviously not meant to stand, she was meant to be held. This one is held by obviously the structure that she's sitting on. Right. Talk to me. Any other details, similarities, differences?
They're both very voluptuous.
Yes.
Which indicates in many cultures wealth, prosperity,
right.
along with other things. Not all, obviously, but in many, just because wealth lets you have food, and food lets you get fat.
Exactly that. And also fat meant survival in prehistoric times. It also meant that you could bear children, right? Your energy was not used just for your own body. It would be also for fertile ground. So yeah, a completely different perspective.
It also seems like the one on the right, they placed woman in a little more elevated position. She's seated for starters, and she seems to be surrounded by powerful animals that perhaps she's seen as a powerful being that creates life and needs to have a higher place in society.
I think, in fact, she had a high place in society. I think, I mean, it's clear that because she's flanked by these animals, that it really is a throne-like gesture, right? That it's a seat. It's very different. Our projection from our perspective, where we are in a patriarchal structure. No, you had an absolutely right reading of it, right? She is the powerful figure, right? And because we don't have masculine figures on these thrones, it makes us think that perhaps it was a matriarchal structure and matriarchal kind of setup. The last thing I want to think about before, and we are going to do, remind me about 7 minutes before class, we have a quick exercise to do. I want to talk about the King Menkaure and his queen, right? That was the other thing in the introduction that you read. And it is this figure, these two figures, okay? And in our book, they talked about, let me get a bit better image of it up. They talked about having, the only thing that they mentioned is the sheer clothing of the female figure and how contour-like it was around her body. I think that interpretation and reading of these royals is a very different interpretation to what perhaps the sculpture was about. So talk to me about what you see in this image. again, the reading pointed how tight her dress was, form-fitting around her body. I don't know if that has anything to do with what the actual sculpture represented. So we're in the Greek period. I'm sorry, Egyptian period, of course. King Menkaure and his queen is what it's interpreted as. But it's a huge stone sculpture, life size.
In a lot of sculptures, paintings, just historical artifacts where a king and queen are represented, a lot of times there's a king in the forefront and a queen behind, below, somehow less central. Mm-hmm. And in this particular sculpture, they seem physically to be more equal. And I think that that's really something to read into, because especially when we look at a lot of Egyptian art, things of higher, I don't remember the words that they used in the textbook, but things that were of more relevance to the piece were often larger. And physically, they're also similar. And that may have been just like they both had broader shoulders and narrower hips and this and that, but there does seem to be a certain amount of physical equality.
Right. I think that's extraordinary. I think most of the time when you represent a queen and a king in art, the king is alone, right? The difference is that, of course, the Egyptian culture had both male and female queens and kings, and there was a lineage where the women had incredible amount of power, where the land, for example, was passed from a mother to daughter. So it was a different way, and there wasn't a sort of difference that was placed on the other gender, right? These are standing side by side in sort of a loving, look at this tiny little hand, it's not tiny, it's life size, but around his waist, right? Just that kind of gesture, this hold, when you care about somebody, like this is an intimate kind of hold. And you're right, I mean, the king is stepping forward. He's almost like the protector, right? He's stepping forward. He has his hands in the stylized Egyptian form figure. So he has his hands together. He's sort of there as protection, but they're very much equal. In fact, in our reading, there was this thing about the dress. In fact, from the waist up, they're actually nude, both of them, right? There's not a difference in how males wore, and they both have loins on the bottom side and the bottom section of their bodies. However, the tops are nude, and it's not a weird thing to have the queen have breasts, because she in fact did. So it's a very different reading. If those of you who are sort of into alternative or thinking about feminist culture, this would be a great reading of the ancient sculpture. So I will put this link into the chat or into your Canvas, and feel free to read about what Egyptian queens, how they were heralded as equals, more or less. I found it interesting that our book only suggested that she had sheer clothing, and that's basically where the conversation ended. So it's that kind of reading of the text that I want you to be critical of, right? Understand that the object is there, but the person who's writing about that object only sees through their lens, right? And you have to, in every single text or in every single subject, you need to understand that what you're reading is not all of it. It's not the whole of it. And in fact, it's very much skewed into one perspective. So reevaluate and reconsider what these things are showing you. The last thing we're going to do is you're going to do a 7-minute prompt that I would like you to post in the discussion forum, because there's not a way for you guys to engage. Let's go back to the Canvas. It's hard for you, as on the digital platform. How do you form a community? How do you get to know one another in a way that in a classroom you would, right? So when you go to, you should see the discussions as part of our Canvas now. I think they're new. I'm sorry about the slow internet. Feel free to chat about the slides that you saw. And by the way, please get a pencil and paper ready, all right? It could be any pencil, any paper. Or you can just pull up a notebook on your laptops. All right, so in the discussion forum, it's on the left-hand side, discussion. So I have to find a way to make you be able to see the discussions. for now, I want a space. Is there another space on Canvas that you know where you can post something and your classmates can read it? Perhaps we can just post it into the Zoom chat. Let's do that because it seems like the discussion forum is not functioning. So if you can put it into the chat when you're done. And what we're going to do is I'm going to time you. I'm going to give you 3 words. And I want you to pour out and write everything that's in your head in relation to these 3 words. I think some of you who were in last semester will know this exercise already. But it's one of the most exciting, I find. All right, so I'm going to give you 3 words. I'm going to time you. You're going to have 7 minutes. And I don't want you to judge yourself. I want you to just pour out everything that comes to your brain after these 3 words are said. Any questions? All right, great. Everybody have a pencil and paper ready. Give me a thumbs up or some sort of reaction that I can find on, thank you, on digital platforms. Thank you, thank you. Okay, the 3 words are, again, don't edit. And you don't have to have it in good English either. This is not a writing course. All right, 3 words are I, am, from, and go. Anything that comes to your mind after I am from. You're about halfway through the writing, but anything that comes to your mind, anything really, what's in your brain after those 3 words? Okay, if you haven't finished yet, just finish the last sentence or whatever word you're working on. And I think for the rest of class, I would love if you guys could share, you know, this thread of where you're from. It could be in sentence format, it could be in the list format, but it's very important to, well, I'll tell you why it's important after we listen, but yeah, let's read or hear some of those if you don't mind, all right? And again, because we can't see you virtually, it doesn't matter how you read or whatever, that none of that is of concern. Just talk to me about who you think you are and where you come from. So I don't know if you want, I can call on you or you could just speak. Who would want to start?
I can go first.
Sorry.
No, you're good if you want to go.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm from Lee, Mass, which is the Berkshires, which is across Massachusetts. It's a small little town and there's not much to do there besides hiking and enjoying the outdoors. I enjoyed living there and growing up there, but my time had come to move from everything that I knew and start my own life. The Berkshires is a place that is filled with rolling hills and my family, but my time has come and I'm ready to move on.
Nice.
And that's about it.
Excellent. Thanks so much. All right,
Yeah.
Hannah. Thanks, Nicole.
So I went a different path with this, a little more philosophical.
Totally good. It can be the philosophy you come from. Some people interpret it as the location. Some people interpret it as the philosophy, right? Grandparents' philosophy. So go for it.
I may have gone a little hard.
Good.
Go
for it. Just read. It's all good.
I am of the earth just as all of you are. We are one organism, one life force, one consciousness operating from 7 billion perspectives, each fundamentally unique in our own creation and evolution, but no less connected themselves with an organ. To operate as independent and innately separate does nothing but cause pain and suffering for each and every being, not only on this earth that we call home, but for each being on this plane of existence. That's it.
Awesome.
That's the whole thing.
Awesome. Who wants to go next? Yeah, right. We can do all kinds of like, there's in Robben Island, the prisoners who were imprisoned in Robben Island because they couldn't, they had a whole university in their bathroom because they wrote the courses on toilet paper, but regardless, they couldn't clap for each other. So they had to rub their hands together. I thought that was such an interesting way of being in an imprisoned institution, right? As a way to show gratitude. Thanks, Hannah. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next just to get mine out of the way. Mine's
Awesome.
very much more literal
Excellent.
than either of those, but I did like the philosophical one. It is very accurate. I just wrote that I'm from Milton, Massachusetts. My mom was born in Georgia. My dad's from Wellesley, Mass. And I've lived here all my life, so I'm very much just rooted here. I'm in the same bedroom I was in since I was a child. Mm-hmm. So it's very much the same exact thing for the past 18 years. But I've been changing it to be my own. Like I put my own art up on my wall just to kind of mark my room as mine. And then I was talking about how my grandparents are from Quebec in France. Mm-hmm. So I have that in like my blood or whatever. But my last name is Irish, but I don't feel like I'm from Ireland at all because like my grandparents aren't from there. It's just the name has been passed down for so long.
Right.
And then at the very end, I just wrote that my cat's also from Georgia. So.
Yes, our pets are just the same, right? It's so interesting. The reason we're doing this quick exercise about I am from, hi, sweetheart, right, is because it cuts through the crap of how we communicate. Usually we're incredibly on the surface, but as soon as, and those of you who took this course before, as soon as you go deeper, right, we're in the US and capital structure, we're here, we're on a service, like I provide a service, you take a service, it's a Starbucks kind of scenario where you want something and you get something, right? When you understand that here, there's so much more possible, right? If you cut to the muscles, to the bones of each other, to the particles of each other, and understand that those particles are exactly the same thing that makes up the soil, right? when you understand how ultimately interconnected not only we are, but the air and the animal, all of it, right? How we are one thing, kind of in when Hannah went. But this writing, right? This writing of simply thinking about those 3 words gives you all of your philosophy. It gives you all of your what you think is the past, right? And it's just you root and you sit. And when you present that to other people, then it becomes a whole other, then the communication's on a whole other level. You go from this to understanding how all of this, whether you wrote out exactly where you were from, the planet, the thing, and the universe, and the, you know, whatever continent that where you're from, it's poetry. And it's that kind of interaction that you need to start projecting outward, right? Just you who you are, and then projecting that who you are out. This idea of living in the same space and recreating it. That's what all of you are doing, whether you've moved somewhere or not, right? Every day you wake up, you're a new human being, entity, whatever, and you have a choice. You can either surround yourself with the same structure, or you break that shit apart. You know, it's totally your choice. All right, go on, keep going. Let's hear more, because so many powerful human beings in this group. Go.
So I mean, my name's Eve, and I'm from Watertown, Massachusetts, and I still live here with my family, and I just got to recently have a puppy that's entered my life. It's my best friend's puppy, and you know, I literally don't know exactly what to write, but I'm a super senior, and you know, it right now is a very different way of learning that I'm excited to explore, but it's also like I wish I could have been more prepared come this semester, just, you know, mentally, I guess, for what is to come with learning online and not being in person, because I'm very much a person who likes to interact with other people and like really be in the room and just, you know, be a human with people.
Of course.
But you know, I'm very excited to be here and on this class, and I'm really excited to learn about prehistoric history and art, and I'm just really looking forward to it.
Awesome. This idea of presence, right? There's no real tangible way to get presence or being in a room and what that feeling is. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of understanding space and understanding each other and the relationship, right? That your body doesn't end, that somebody else's body is right next to yours. That feeling we can't replicate online yet. But this does come close. I mean, being able to talk about who you are on a virtual platform with total strangers is quite exciting. What the possibilities could be, right? If you have to run, that's fine. We're going to pick up. I want all of these. By the way, can you take a JPEG of all your writing before we end and drop it into the chat box? Because I would love for each of you to have a record of who each other is, because that's going to shape the course a lot. We do have time for a few more. So anyone want to volunteer before you will get to read it next class as well. So yeah, great. Awesome. They're popping into the chat. But anyone that didn't read?
I
have a list. I won't mind reading real quick. I didn't put it in paragraph form.
Great.
I am from Swampscott, Hudson, Marlborough, United States. But I am from my past self. I am from my mistakes. I am from those before me. I am from the stars. I am from my creativity. I am from my best days, and I am from my worst days.
Hey, could you all publish these things? And forget publishing in like the real context, but just throw them on social media, because social media doesn't get past that superficial level either, right? Penetrate social media with some of this thing that actually has content, right? Really well done. I mean, there really should be a publication of these because they're so good. The idea of mistakes, right? In education, we told you that those are the worst things you can make. In creativity, they're the best things you can make. Only mistake. I mean, it's super important that you make mistakes in life. Please do, because they guide you. Okay.
I had a teacher in high school, and I will never forget this, or it was middle school, that there's no mistakes in art, only discoveries. Like you literally cannot make a mistake in art because it's art.
Because there's no right answers. Right? It's not a given. It's not a math formula that you can solve. Unfortunately, it's unsolvable. And that's why it's super interesting. So keep going. Who would like to go next?
I'll go if no one else wants to go.
Go for it, jump in.
I am from a dead-end street where nature has begun reclaiming the pavement. I'm from the embrace of nature and imagination. I'm from the squishy moss under my feet and the depths of the woods.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we all are. Yeah, that's awesome. I love the start of the dead end road. Right? That makes you stop right there and you're like, what? Right. But the poignancy of having that at the beginning is really nice, because this is exactly the time that we're in. Humanity is at a dead end with Corona. Like, we've stopped. And then turning to nature is really our sort of only alternative, guys. I'm sorry to point it so bleakly. I've been teaching this for the last 10 years, and it's always been like a theory of like, yes, humanity should stop doing the habitual actions. But now we actually, like, there's no other way around it. This is the way through it, is that we need to change fundamentally. Okay. What else, guys? Throw me another one. Excellent. Nicely done. Anyone else? And if you don't feel like sharing today, I mean, it's not a sharing kind of thing, but you're welcome to also do it at the beginning of the class. Anyone else want to read where I'm from? It could be, I mean, don't judge it. It can be, you know, it doesn't have to be poetry. Go for it, Dylan.
I am from Western Michigan. It's a place that my dad's family has lived for generations prior to the United States. We're Ottawa Indian from my dad's side, so the family has lived out there for hundreds of years. The area has a bunch of small towns and like smaller, older cities that are dotted along the Grand River, which kind of which are like pale in comparison to the North Shore of Massachusetts. But it's much more fun to drive through because you're going through farmland or through the woods rather than the almost the infinite amount of cityscape that you see out here.
Such a difference. It's so interesting, the idea of the perspective of, first of all, the Native American population, right? The people that moved into the north in that peninsula was about 10,000 years ago, right? So folks that have gone through that strain where humans have moved through the world. So that the history of that is also super interesting. But the idea of land and land ownership, and the land therefore being cut up into smaller fragments to then house people or whatever into cities is also very interesting. It's not, there's not an understanding, these ideas that these things can be bordered up and somehow become the city or become the state or become, it's just someone's madness in their brain. Like, someone made up that structure in their head. There's another way of looking at land. And the Native American perspective is that other way of looking at land. It's unownable. Like, it's not anyone. It's shared, obviously, and not just by humans, right? So and looking at this kind of having open land and understanding that that's just as valuable as if you saw the skyscrapers of New York bunched in the city format, right? The value of land, the value of it means the value of the planet. Just because there's no structure or architecture there is huge. I mean, there's the reason why for example, African Americans, Native Americans, losing myself here in this poetry, and we're at the end. Right there, some monuments have been preserved over centuries and centuries, and we have the traces of them. We have the artifacts. We have the pyramids, right? But the traces that we have are just one perspective. There's another perspective of not leaving a trace behind, right? And thinking about the value of that, especially now where we leave so much trash. Native American perspective did not leave monuments around. They did not leave a temple for people to pray at because they didn't need it. They didn't need a temple to pray at. Their temple was everywhere. Right, and the idea that so just know that there's a different, even in prehistory, there's these artifacts that are left over, but then the stuff that is not left over, or the stuff that is not made into a specific figurine or whatever, that's just as important. Does that make sense? I know it's a bit vague, but it's just another perspective. Awesome, and I'm sorry we're at the end. I do want to read all of them, so make sure you post them all, and that also tells me who was here today. If there's any ideas or concerns or anything that you have about the class, I will host optional office hours for you guys Tuesdays from 1 to 2, and I'll put that link into Canvas. But certainly if you have any questions, feel free to email me right, about all your concerns and questions. We will, please read the Prehistoric for next class. We will go into Mesopotamia in the next class, looking at slides from that, and then you will have a short quiz next Tuesday. That quiz is not with the right date on it, so don't do it yet, okay? So make sure you do the Prehistoric reading tonight, again with a critical eye, and then Mesopotamia comes next. Questions? Concerns? Awesome. Go outside and play or run or whatever. You know what I mean. Go outside and enjoy yourself. Yeah.
I was just hoping I could talk to you really quickly before.
Sure.
No one else has to be here. I don't care if you are or not.
Okay, the rest of you can go.
If
you want.
If you're not. Yeah.
All right.
So I wanted to email you about this, but it was more just, it's easier just to say it. But so I have a glass blowing class during this time.
Okay.
On Thursdays, so I won't be able to be in the Thursday sessions, but I will be here on Tuesdays.
Perfect. So my question was actually for all of you. If there is a time on Thursday that works better for most, then I can switch. However, if most are okay with the 11 o'clock time, then we will keep it at 11. I just need everybody to email me what their time preferences are. For now, I have a 1:40 class, so I would prefer 11. Okay. So again, these are the things with asynchronous classes. You do not have to attend every class. You absolutely don't. Understand that, unfortunately, that gives you the work that we do in class and the things that we talk about, you just have to catch up on your own. And with the video recording, it should be relatively easy. If you, do you know how to go Eve through Zoom and look up the previous class by the date and just view that video?
Yes.
Okay, great. So for those of you who don't, it's right listed, actually Zoom's part of Canvas, so you can just go there and look at the recordings and you should be able to find it there, okay? I also try to send it out once the recording is there, once I see that it's there. So actually it shouldn't be a big deal at all. Okay, Eve, what I just need to hear from you after you view the video, if you have any concerns or questions, or just check in with me. Send me like one sentence on email saying, I've watched the video, please mark me for attendance.
Got it, no problem.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Have a good day.
You too.
Anyone else? Dylan, Brianna, and Nicole, do you have any questions?
Oh, sorry, I was just putting in the thing that I needed,
Perfect, you're writing.
Awesome. Can I just confirm that the homework for tonight is reading?
Right, the homework for tonight is reading. Most of this class, unfortunately or fortunately, is going to be reading that text. But of course we have a parallel education that's happening at the same time as the text. Just for your fun.
All right, thank you.
Awesome, thanks Brianna.
Bye.